With the long-awaited release of Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain this year finally in the background, and with Kojima leaving Konami after 25 years of making this series a legend, I've certainly been thinking a lot about how much this series has impacted me throughout all of its installments. I first discovered the series, like most players, with Metal Gear Solid on the original PlayStation, and since then I've played through every game at least once, and some of those many more times than that. They've all affected me in some way, so in appreciation for the series and Mr. Kojima himself, I'd like to list off my top 10 favorite Metal Gear franchise moments. However, there's one ground rule. I'll only be selecting one moment per game. Otherwise, this would just be 10 moments from Snake Eater.
Metal Gear.
Oh, and spoilers! Let's get going. I'm starting off here with the first mind blow in the series. The revelation that Big Boss, who had been Snake's commanding officer throughout the game, was behind Outer Heaven all along. The bad guy being the good guy's commander was a trope even in 1987. However, Kojima puts his own spin on it with one of the series' first fourth wall breaks, with Big Boss taunting the player rather than Snake, commanding them to turn off the game console while Solid Snake makes his way to confront him. Even today, it's a charming and unique touch that foreshadows Kojima's techniques to come later on. Yeah, a lot of people hate this game, but my feelings on it will have to come another day. For now, I'll just say that while it has a lot of flaws, I tend to forgive it in the same way that the original Metal Gear Solid had a lot of forgivable flaws. One thing I do like is the story. I was curious how Big Boss would develop into his goal following the events of Snake Eater, and here we get to see him very much lost and unsure about his place in the world, only to have to confront a military organization that's threatening his good name. One moment that sticks out to me in particular is the death scene of Eliza, a psychic soldier similar to Psycho Mantis, which alludes to the future conflict between Liquid and Solid Snake.
Snake, your son will bring the world to ruin. Your son will save the world.
What are you trying to say, Elisa?
The music that underscores this moment is especially effective, as it gives the prediction an emotional but contemplative vibe. Despite Portable Ops' negative reputation, this is a moment that's always stuck with me. This one is especially important for people like me, who didn't play Peace Walker until very recently, considering it's the inciting moment for all of the events that play out across Ground Zeroes and the Phantom Pain. In an extra ending for this game, Paz, a seemingly innocuous child resident of Mother Base, turns out to be a spy for Zero's organization. She exposes her cover when she attempts to use Big Boss's Metal Gear Zeke to launch a nuclear missile at the United States, pinning the crime on MSF. Before this, Paz never really interested me at all, but her change here really caught my eye for 3 reasons. 1, her actions illustrate the real competition going on between Boss and Zero after their parting of ways, something which had only existed in the background of the series until this scene. 2nd, to even get to this moment requires many hours of grinding and playing past the credits roll, which is strange because the events here turn out to be so important. Lastly, for a game which was already full of strange moments, this is a weird way to handle a boss battle. From Paz giving her motivation speech in her underwear, to the fight blaring a catchy but misplaced J-pop tune right out of the gate, this battle feels completely unreal given the dire circumstances that Big Boss is wrestling with. Just imagine this shit happening during the fight with Metal Gear Rex. I'm not sure I'm ever going to forget this moment. Of course, this one comes right after the Peace Walker reveal, as the optional ending from the prior was used to set up one of the grimmest moments in the entire series. After being imprisoned and suffering psychological and physical torture, Paz had been tormented much worse than the other punching bag of the series, Otacon, ever was. With Paz having nearly been responsible for a nuclear strike on civilians, I'm not sure anyone wanted Paz to get off easy, but nobody would have expected that she would get all of this and then have to be literally cut open to remove an implanted bomb on the way back to Mother Base. At least she's safe now and... Ooh. No. Metal Gear 2 may be the most underplayed of all the games in the series, due to its lack of a proper Western release until it was already over 15 years old. Regardless, it still remains one of the best entries in the series. For any modern players going back to check it out now, what's going to strike them the most is how this relatively unknown game was used to inspire the series' most widespread hit. Here are just a couple of the events in this game which were used in the later entry. You need to meet a disguised contact in the women's restroom. You have a surprise close-quarters elevator fight against previously invisible enemies. You have a chase up a spiral staircase with enemies in pursuit. There's a cyborg ninja. Really, this list just goes on and on. If you haven't, just play this game already. Surprise! Okay, so it's true I said Snake Eater has the best moments in the series, and hell, I could probably make a top 10 Metal Gear Solid 3 moments list in the future. But for this list I decided I wanted to go in a different direction rather than going with the obvious choice. So yeah, Metal Gear Solid 3's Ocelot. Pretty much everything he does. From the silly hand gestures, the ridiculous cat noises, it's fair to say that pretty much nobody expected this to be Ocelot's personality going into this prequel, but this is what we got, and I fucking love him. Seriously, he's like one of my favorite characters of all time. I even sometimes do his hand thing. I just love this guy so much. Probably my favorite memory concerning him comes from a time when I was playing through the series with a buddy of mine, but shortly after we met up to play through the opening hours of Snake Eater, he had a pretty serious fever, and as a result, he was drifting off to sleep while he was watching me play. The next day, he told me about a strange dream he had, where he saw Ocelot spinning his revolvers on both hands, fending off a wave of bees. I mean, there's no way that could be real, right? There's no way. I love this guy. Alright, I'm gonna blow your mind here. I'm a huge Metal Gear fan. And guess what? I really like Raiden. Not just in 4, even in 2 he was okay with me. My opinion's obviously in the minority here, but the reason it comes up is it meant that I had a very different reaction to Kojima making Raiden the cyborg ninja in number 4. Whereas the rest of the world seemed to think that this was a fitting way to apologize for making us play as him in 2, I always found it a bit heartbreaking. If you think about it, Raiden is one of the saddest characters in the Metal Gear series. He starts out as a child soldier and grows up with that background until he first found happiness in Rose, a woman who then turned out to be a tool of the Patriots. Basically, everywhere he goes, he just gets used by other people. Even though he's just as legendary of a soldier as Solid Snake, he's never able to break out of the Patriots' control until he goes rogue. But then he's captured again and experimented on, where they cut away his brain and spinal column from his body and put him into this. At this point in Metal Gear Solid 4, he feels he has no use other than fighting, and he cares about nothing else. He doesn't seem to care if he's going to live or die, and he has no hesitation in doing self-destructive actions. This fight against Vamp is a literal demonstration of that fact, and while it's certainly a great fight, it's also very sad. Don't worry, Raiden. I'll always be on your side. Towards the final hours of the Phantom Pain, I was really starting to worry that I'd have nothing for this list. I was pleased by some of the cameos we had, and the gameplay here is off the charts, but none of the story points were really doing it for me. Then, out of nowhere, this. Kojima seems to have a second sense for predicting player reactions, something he's often utilized in crafting some of the series' greatest fourth wall breaks. Here, he puts those skills into practice for creating a haunting atmosphere, one that makes me really regret that Silent Hills will never be a thing. In this mission, after stalking the hallways of the quarantine platform, I really had no idea where Kojima was going with this. There's actually no danger here, just a lot of blood, screams, and death. Then, when he reveals that those infected cannot be allowed to escape, Venom Snake is forced to stalk back down the hallways of those he's trying to save and eliminate every soldier still living there. There's also a lot more added to the scene to really make this moment work. Every execution you must perform on your friendly soldiers is punctuated by a quick HUD notification that informs you that a soldier has died, and as you hold your sights on each of the soldiers you're putting down, their names are revealed, and you may be sad to realize that you recognize some of them. One of my best soldiers that I used in several combat missions was one of the first people I had to put down. Then, in the final room, your soldiers accept what must be done, and they all salute you as you pick them off one by one. Oh, and the cutscene that follows this moment? Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Well, it's time for more sadness! Yay! I know this list seems to be littered with melancholic moments, but there's something about this scene that I've never been able to get out of my head. Since first being introduced to Emma, Metal Gear Solid 2 had been teasing us with the implied reunion of brother and sister. This is probably part of the reason why players were able to put up with a sudden water-level escort mission. Anyway, rather than playing to expectation, Kojima performs one of the cruelest tricks in video gaming history by having Emma mortally stabbed and having her bleeding to death by the time she's able to see her brother again. Then, when she's passed on and Otacon is walking away, this happens.
Hal, I miss you. Hal, I miss you. I miss you. I miss you.
Even as the player passively watching, this is almost too much to bear. I guess it's a good thing that Otacon will never be sad again.
Meryl.
What is it?
Meryl, get down.
For me, the most memorable moment in Metal Gear Solid came in Snake's first encounter with Sniper Wolf in the long hallway. I'll have to go off on a tangent here, so just indulge me. Despite being about nuclear war and legendary soldiers, the Metal Gear series has never come off as glorifying the violence seen in its games. Even in the original Metal Gear Solid, despite being a legend, Snake is actually a miserable husk of a man who only goes back into action because he realizes he doesn't have any other skills. It was important to introduce Meryl as a soldier like so many others, who was raised on believing in the glory of battle, including being partly inspired by the legend Solid Snake himself. Sadly for Meryl, her encounter with the real Snake is an uncomfortable moment of reality versus fantasy. As anyone who has come close to realizing their childhood dreams can attest to, reality always unfortunately falls short. Snake is entirely pessimistic and mildly annoyed by Meryl's naivete about war and battle. Then we have this, which on the grander scale helps to punctuate a major theme throughout the series. There are no perfect characters in Metal Gear Solid. Nearly everyone has been negatively affected by the violence in their past, but Meryl is a rookie soldier who, despite saying some terrible things, seems to be trying to keep her beliefs in the glory of battle going. There are small hints of this facade slipping as she talks about feeling sick when smelling the blood on her stolen uniform, or even how she refers to Psycho Mantis as a monster, whereas Snake treats him with respect. When she's shot and used as simple bait for Solid Snake, the mask finally breaks and she's given a rude awakening about war. As she says, war is ugly. There's nothing glamorous about it. To this day, violence is glorified to a disturbing degree in cultures around the world. Even in Japan, where Metal Gear was born, some call to eliminate the anti-war policy that Japan has enacted since the end of World War II. Despite being games essentially about violence, the Metal Gear series' focus on stealth over combat and earnest but sometimes goofy storytelling has always attempted to emphasize the negativity of violence. This is just one way that the series has made itself stand out as something special over the years. And these 10 moments are part of what have made this series such a legendary franchise for me. Thank you, Mr. Kojima. Thank you.